Okay, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to try to go over some really basic conservation techniques that you could use on military surplus gear. Nylon pouches, bags, canteen pouch, 2-quart canteen, Alice clips, old stuff here. Even some of this newer stuff, this is newer, but it's probably 10 years old. Marine Corps individual first aid kit pouch. Actually has a date in here, looks like 2007 written on the tag. That's interesting. This one's super dirty and you can see frayed, really rough shape. This one here, a little bit better, still dirty, frayed, seams coming apart. I've also got here, magazine pouches. These things, these old Alice, what I would call 782 gear. These things were made pretty indestructible. I would say they're better quality than some of the things more recently made. Still though, you'll have seams fraying on the inside, and honestly it just doesn't work as well as a newer piece. Obviously these old designs have been in use since Vietnam. So what I'm going to work on today, I'm going to show you this. This is a 2-quart canteen cover, right? It's dirty, it's used, it's not in terrible shape, it has the strap. You can see here all of this fraying, and so we're going to take care of that. We're going to reinforce these seams, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. This is CA glue. You might know it as super glue. This particular one that I'm using is thin, so this is what I would call water thin, and I use a very, very small dropper right here. The drawback with the water thin is it could soak through, and you can get it on the outside. It'll soak actually all the way through this fabric, and it'll show up as a dark spot if you get a little crazy with it. I'm not too worried about that with this piece. I'm just looking to stop this fraying and try to conserve it. So this would be a conservation technique. If you don't have this, you can get this at a craft store. You can also use just hardware store super glue. Same thing, basically. Super glue will be a little bit thicker. It might be easier to use without soaking through. What I'm going to do with this first thing is I am going to turn it inside out. If you've got a piece that's really dirty and you want to clean it, I would wait until after we do this process. If I put this in a wash machine or do something to clean this up, I might just make this worse. And if I'm getting close in any areas to tearing through a seam, then I might actually damage the unit more than what I am able to repair with this method here. So what I'm going to do, I'm not even going to cut these strings off right now. Basically what I do is I take this, and you can see I've got the really super thin dropper on here. You can get this at craft stores or Amazon. And I'm going to work through here. I'm going to find these seams where they're fraying at. And you can see this has just been cut. There's no heat that's been applied to these. There's nothing that's been done from the factory originally to prevent this fraying. So fraying is inevitable. There's been some stitching on here on this piece, looks like, but that is all. But so basically I just take this and very carefully, whoops, I'm leaking a little bit here. Very, very carefully, I'm just barely dripping and dropping it onto the seam right here. Still, I don't have a good bond here. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna take that off for now. Try to be extra careful here. So, come through and apply this to the seam, and I work my way along the full length of the seam, just a tiny, tiny bit. The water thin CA glue that I have in this bottle just drips right out. If you're using thicker stuff or hardware store super glue, you're gonna have to squeeze it. You're gonna require a little bit extra effort. I'm not worried about the fraying right now. I am going to come back and trim that up after I've done this process. So I'm going to go through here and do this to the full length of these seams. And I may have to come back and do it on both sides, right? There's two pieces here. I don't want to touch it right now, but it's still wet. But I'll kind of come through. And if I'm missing spots, that's okay. It's going to prevent the fraying from spreading. So here we'll say, I'll call that good for now. I'm going to flip this over to do the other side. Again, this is still a little bit wet. You got to be careful. You're going to get it on your hands. Here you can see it fraying a little bit right here. Might do that. You can see how it turns that darker when it hits. When that dries, that's going to stay that way. It doesn't soak through to the other side, so you won't see it once it's right side in. Let's go ahead here. I'm going to work this side just like I did the other side. Coming through. Here. Coming around. So this is the 2-quart canteen pouch. Usually when you find these, they're not in bad shape. The biggest thing is going to be the fur, fake fur stuff here on the inside, frays along the seams. Usually I don't see these in bad shape. A lot of times that's because they were not issued or used as harshly or as often as other canteen pouches, which I don't have. I don't have another one here in front of me. But basically I've worked around here, and then once this dries I can come back and I can cut these strings off, right? So that is that. Let me show you one that here. This one here is one that I've done previously. One thing you'll notice is when you apply the glue to the seams get really stiff, right? But when I turn this one inside out, you can see how I've cleaned it up. So CA glue around all these seams, come back with scissors here and trim those up, and then it's not going to fray anymore. If it does fray just a little bit like here, it's just going to stop where it's at, right? It's not going to be the big long strings that you saw earlier on this one here, okay? It's going to stay like this now. It's not going to get worse. So if you have a piece that is something you want to save, something you want to use, this is a good way to prevent further damage.